This is Podco Media Networks.
On episode 96 of Confessions of a Marketer, we're celebrating our differences. Hi, it's Mark Reed Edwards. Welcome back to Confessions of a Marketer. We have Christina Mallon of the Wunderman Thompson Inclusive Design Practice back in to continue our discussion about inclusive design. Next time, we have David Lemley on rebranding Starbucks and retail voodoo. Soon, Steve Randazzo will be in to discuss experiences. We'll have David C. Baker on building an agency and John McDonald of The Good on optimization. And I have a special guest lined up for episodes 100 and 101 that we will announce shortly. We'll reach that 100 episode milestone on September 30th, and we're just getting started. Should be a great end to 2019. We have a great lineup of podcasts on Podco Media Networks. There's this one, the Innovation Podcast, Demystifying Data, and My First Job. Plus, we have the Innovate Her Podcast, hosted by Innovate Her KC founder Lauren Conaway, on the way in October, and a podcast about Latin American business shortly after that. Head over to podcomedia.com to listen and subscribe. Okay, back to Christina Mallon. Christina and I continue our discussion as we touch on the way in which fashion brands like Tommy Hilfiger have been on the vanguard of celebrating our differences. We discuss how Tommy Adaptive elevated the brand by making functional and fashionable clothing available. We also delve more into the work that Wunderman Thompson did. The key, Christina says, is staying away from inspiration porn. We also talk about the nonprofit organization she co-founded, the Open Style Lab, which works on accessible technology and teaching STEM through accessible fashion design. This is a great, important discussion, so let's get to it. I want to talk about Tommy Adaptive. One of my observations about fashion, not being that fashionable myself, but having watched, over the last 30 or 40 years, fashion being on the leading edge of bringing society into accepting minorities. If you look back at the Benetton campaign of 30 years ago, the colors of Benetton, it's just, they really pushed this acceptance that not everyone is white, that there are different people throughout the world. And when I looked at the Tommy Adaptive work, it kind of reminded me of that people look different. People have different abilities. And that's what the Tommy Adaptive work celebrates. It doesn't just try and say, we care about you. It actually celebrates that.
I definitely agree. And I'm happy to hear that you think that, because that's definitely what we were trying to do when partnering with Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive. I think, the great thing is that this adaptive clothing line didn't feel far from the brand. It didn't feel like a one-off, because Tommy Hilfiger is all about democratizing design. And what they did here with Tommy Hilfiger Adaptive is really an amazing example of democratizing fashion, and not just clothing, but also representation. And that's very important, because stigma attached to disability is such a problem, but how they elevated the brand and used all of the same designs that they have at Tommy Hilfiger and adapted them and made them accessible. And I think that's really important, because when you look at adaptive fashion previously, it's been very geriatric, one-off designs. Tommy was the first functional and fashionable brand to create adaptive clothing.
So what was the pitch like? What sparked the relationship with Tommy Hilfiger on this?
Yeah, I think that we've done previous work with Special Olympics. I actually wasn't on the pitch team for this. I was brought in after we won the business, but from the deck that I saw, they were impressed with our understanding of the market, and then also our view on inclusive design as better design, and us and the tone that we had. It wasn't inspiration porn, and that we did a service to people with disabilities. And I think there's having a high level taste and a high quality taste that Tommy Hilfiger has, but also being able to be empathetic with the market.
It's interesting work. I encourage everybody to Google Tommy Adaptive and look at the website, which I think is a prime example of the work that you did and how inclusive it is and really how beautiful the photography is. It's really well executed. It's a great idea, and we all have great ideas, but executing it takes it to the next level, I think.
And if you go to the YouTube page, you'll be able to see kind of the behind the scenes of the content that we captured. And it really talks about how we were inclusive from end to end. And I think that's very important because we see some brands that will just have, a model with a disability in the ad, but that model couldn't put the clothes on themselves, or that the store where you bought that clothes isn't accessible for a wheelchair. So I think as more brands get into this, diversity, inclusion, and social impact, we'll start to see the brands that are doing it well and not doing it well, because there'll be these instances where one part of their messaging wasn't inclusive, and we'll see social media say something about it.
We'll have links to that in our show notes. So anyway, you mentioned it earlier, Open Style Lab. Can you tell me about that? This operation that you started?
Yeah, so I was a late stage co-founder of Open Style Lab. It was founded at MIT, where that's part I wasn't involved in. I was more involved in at the Parsons angle, but really kind of our mission is to make style accessible to people of all abilities by 2025 through technology and design. And what we are is we're a 501(c)(3), and what we try to do here is really kind of three parts. We are trying to teach STEM through fashion design by making accessible, I would say, kind of accessible, like a sewing machine we've made accessible needle and threads, we've made accessible garments. Just having to teach, STEM through fashion design, as I would say it's been around 96% of women with disabilities are undereducated. So that's one part of what we do at Open Style Lab, is we try to teach accessible fashion design using STEM. And then another part is that we do is the summer program, where we team a bunch of fellows that are in engineering, fashion, and healthcare. And they work together to create an accessible design. And we all know this, having teams and people from different backgrounds on a team can create very innovative and better products. So we do that with the summer program at Parsons. We also have events outside of Parsons where we teach STEM, and they're really about raising awareness of the importance of inclusive design and accessibility.
Yeah, you don't think of STEM as being related to style.
Yeah.
There's all these different ways to arrive at education, right? To learn, and taking that on-ramp is fascinating.
Yeah, we started to see, we had 5 years Open Style Lab has been around, and each summer we focus on creating the actual garment. That could either be an accessible dress, an accessible coat, an accessible suit. But this summer we really looked back and said, okay, one of the great things that we saw that people got out of this was also the education part. And that was both, fellows and then the clients we were making the products for. We thought about, okay, so how do we scale this? Let's create mini education sessions and products using STEM that can teach women with disabilities, because we saw, okay, wow, there is a huge issue with education of women with disabilities. And then Open Style Lab, we need to figure out how we can scale. So this summer we created products that allow you to design if you have a disability. And then also videos that go along with that is very, very easy. It doesn't matter how much cognitive ability that you have. You should be able to understand kind of the process in these videos. So really kind of boxing up all our knowledge and putting all of these accessible tools in one box, along with videos, to increase STEM education through fashion design. Because, it's very hard to get people to want to join different STEM events and STEM camps. We thought fashion design is a really interesting way in that would get more people excited.
Yeah, definitely. And in a way, you can build yourself a pipeline of talent for Wunderman Thompson too.
So that is the other kind of thing that I've been thinking of is, we have a maker lab here at Wunderman Thompson where we can create prototypes, and we have, 3D printer, laser cutter. We have all of the best tools, and we've done this for clients before. But how do we kind of take some of the students that I'm working with OSL and bring them into Wunderman Thompson to kind of create and prototype products for our clients.
Yeah, interesting. And that will make the work that you do more important at Wunderman Thompson as you get more talent in and build that funnel of people. The work will grow and grow.
Definitely. And, I think having people who also are aware of inclusive design is very, very important. And I think OSL can definitely be a funnel to Wunderman Thompson. But I think, the great thing and what I love about Wunderman Thompson, when I became fully disabled a few years ago, I thought I would never go back into advertising. And when I came to Wunderman Thompson for the interview, I just felt like this is a place that would accept me as a person with a disability, but also find my disability as an advantage. And they've really allowed me to be able to shine and kind of bring this new way of thinking of inclusive design to our clients. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity here at Wunderman Thompson and our clients for being open to this new style of design, because I really do think that this is a better way to design, and this is the future of design.
So I think the work you're doing is really important, but usually with important things, there's like a long background to it, but it feels here like you're just at the beginning of this. So what do you think is next with inclusive design?
I'm so proud of, especially from what I see with the students in Open Style Lab, that the next future leaders and designers they really care and have a lot of empathy. So I think that they're going to take inclusive design to the next level. But what I see in the next 5 years, at least from Wunderman Thompson, is that all of the work that we put out will be inclusive. And that's really my goal, is to ensure that everything that we do is as inclusive as possible for our clients. And that's kind of what I see in the next 5, but in the next 10 or 15, it's so hard to imagine. But I really see kind of products and advertising being modular. So if you look at kind of the IKEA way of working, is that you can make those products and make different designs to work for you. And I really see that there's one base design for everyone, and then it can be modular based off your abilities. And that's how I really see the future of design, because it is really difficult to make separate products for people with disabilities and then products for people without disabilities. Making two is really expensive. So I see a very modular future when it comes to design that can work for many different abilities, but it's one product.
Yeah, and it's just pieces that you put together in a different way.
Exactly. And I think when you look at some website design now, they have an accessible version where you can kind of set the different accessibility features to work for your disability. And that's how I see kind of design is moving in the future when it comes to inclusive design.
It'll just be design, right?
Yes.
Well, Christina, it was great to have you here. I've learned a lot, and I'm really intrigued to watch your practice develop over the coming years. And I can't wait to get this episode in front of my listeners. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks so much for your time.
All right, next time, David Lemley on rebranding Starbucks and some retail voodoo. So stay with us. This episode of Confessions of a Marketer was written, produced, and edited by yours truly. T. Jordan of A-Class Productions wrote the theme music. Confessions of a Marketer is a trademark of Podco Media Networks, and this episode is copyright 2019. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. See you next time.